So it's recording. Good evening to all participants and good evening to our speaker, Dr. Manoj Kumar Panda. Uh, he is he is my senior. He was my senior and he will be my senior. So he was my senior in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and currently he is an assistant professor in the Department of Philosophy, Presidency, University, Kolkata. He has done his MPhil and PhD in Jawaharlal Nehru University. His area of specializations are philosophy of mind, philosophy of perception and consciousness, then Western epistemology, then contemporary Western philosophy, etc. From 2013 onwards, uh, Dr. Panda, uh, he is having many publication of articles in important journals and edited books in his credit. And prior to his teaching in the Presidency University in the year 2015, he has in various colleges of Delhi University as a guest faculty and in the Center for Philosophy in Jawaharlal Nehru University as the teaching assistant. He has presented many papers and he has delivered many invited talks in various international and national seminar, conference, and workshop. Today, he will be deliberating on a topic that is part of our contemporary political thought, a paper that is I am currently dealing with my third semester students. And one of the content of contemporary political thought is the political liberalism of John Rawls. And in that content, there is also another aspect that is justice as fairness. And Sanjay Meher, currently assistant professor of Berhampur University, maybe in the next Sunday, he is going to deal with that. So no doubt, political liberalism is the book of John Rawls that has been published in 1993, and much before it, his another book that is a theory of justice that has been published in 1971. But uh, political liberalism, to my understanding, it gives a very broad horizon or perspective in which one can locate or one can uh, have debates on the theory of justice by John Rawls. So primarily because of that reason, I thought that talk on political liberalism of John Rawls must be prior to the talk uh, on justice as fairness by John Rawls. So that was the intention. I thought that this political liberalism, it will provide a context in which one can deal with this concept justice as fairness. In his book Political Liberalism that has been published in 1993, John Rawls has updated his earlier work, A Theory of Justice, that has been published in 1971. In it, Rawls attempts to show that his theory of justice is not a comprehensive, conception of good, but is instead compatible with a liberal conception of the role of justice. That is, the government should be neutral between the competing conception of good. His theory of political liberalism explores the legitimate use of political power in a democracy, and it envisions how civic unity might endure despite the diversity of worldview that a free institution allows. So this is not and say, we can conclude his work, but uh, this requires a unpacking. I said in a packed manner, so it requires it needs to be unpacked. So Dr. Panda, I think he's the right person to unpack this political liberalism, and he will help us that how to understand political liberalism of John Rawls. And subsequently, this lecture will help us to understand his book if we go through it in future. So with this, I invite Dr. Panda to start his discussion. So thank you, Manoj Bhaiya. Now you can start.
Okay. Uh, Thank you so much, um, Himanshu, Dr. Mishra, um, for um, inviting me to deliver a talk on John Rawls' political liberalism. Uh, as you know, as Dr. Mishra has already mentioned, um, Political Liberalism is a book authored by John Rawls. And if you go through that book, it has uh, several aspects and, almost, more than 300 pages. And it will not be possible, as uh, you all are well aware, to cover all the aspects in a single lecture, but I will reflect on some of the fundamental issues and you can say some of the fundamental questions um, um, regarding uh, the um, the tussle between liberty and law or the rule of the state. So one can say that the political philosophy is all about how to, balance, how to create a balance between um, a free, the notion of a free individual and the rules of the state or the laws of the state that which are, um, applied in various contexts or which are um, I mean um, we have to follow in various contexts. So at the outset, let me tell you that um, this lecture in this lecture I am not going to have discuss about what I think uh, and about the political liberalism. That will be a research paper. So what I'm going to do is I will be, being honest to John Rawls himself. I will just point out some of the basic issues um, with his uh, view called political liberalism. As you know, many of us um, might believe, and uh, uh, some may not believe, that we live in a free society. You might believe that some of us believe that we live in a free society, and some might ask, how free are we, as Ted Hondrek asks? Are we really free? Are we really living in a free society? But if we presuppose that we are free individuals, given the fact that, we know the limitation, but if we, just assume uh, to start with, to begin with, that we are free individuals, then um, many issues await. Many issues um, will be point of intense debate and discussions. So one can start with um, you know one can start the discussion on John Rawls' political liberalism with the notion of a free society. You know, uh, at the outset, one can ask, um, what does it mean to live in a free society? And what is the notion of free society? Are we really free? And reasonably, minimally speaking, one can say that um, a free society is the society where um, citizens have diversity in their worldviews. I mean, if I'm living in a free society, I have my own worldview. You also have your worldview. Let me just tell you at the beginning, worldview is, you can call it your perspective towards the world you live in, or your attitude towards the world. Generally speaking, your attitude towards the world or towards the surrounding that uh, we live in. So, if we are living in a free society, this means um, we have uh, diversity in our worldviews, in our perspectives towards each other. And what does that mean? It means several aspects of our society are open to free interpretation. I mean, you might believe in religion, whatever religion you uh, would like to believe in. You might not believe in any religion at all. Okay. And more importantly, this is a moral notion, which is that in a free society we have different conception of right and wrong. I mean, what is right for you may not be right for me, and what is wrong for you may be right for me. So there are different conceptions of right and wrong, and even more importantly, uh, we have different opinions, as we are aware, um, about how to live, about the standards of living, how to live in this society. So we have also different relationships to value. I mean, a particular value that we identify, the relationship that you have with that particular value, I might not have the same relationship with that particular value. I might utilize that value in a different context. It could be natural value or any material value or spiritual values or whatever. Okay. So, and very significantly, one might say that in a free society, we have contrary commitments. We do not have, unanimous, we do not have same commitment towards everything. We might have contrary or contradictory commitments. So, um, so these are some of the aspects of um, the idea of living in a free society. I have pointed out several aspects, starting from religion to standards of living to the conception of right and wrong, uh, and having different relationships to the values that we have in this world. So, this is one aspect of the dilemma, one can say, that we are living in a free society, and this means these aspects. Okay. On the other hand, if we see if we look into a seemingly opposite phenomena, that is, we are also aware that uh, um, we are governed by unified law by the state, and uh, uh, that is if that is somehow necessary. That's also a question. Is it at all necessary, or not? I'm not going into that question, that whether law is at all necessary or not, and we are aware that what will happen if we do not have a unified law. But the fact is that we are governed by a unified law, and if unified law means if we are living in a same place, in the same territory, for example, we it is necessary that we are governed by unified law. So we are aware that each country is governed by unified law. Maybe in some countries there are various states, and those states have different laws, like in USA. We are also aware of that. But um, generally speaking, each country is governed by unified law. So if this is the case, it is also necessary that there is a need to impose, there is a need to implement, uh, you know, a unified law on diversified citizens. That is the, that is the scenario that, um, uh, that's, I would say, the another part of the dilemma. Like, on the one hand, we are free individuals. We believe that we live in a free society, and it has various aspects. Uh, I mean, what it is like to be free. We are aware of that. On the other hand, we are governed by uh, unified law, and obviously, uh, we are diversified individuals, um, and more importantly, we have diversified subjectivity. Our choices are different. Our perspectives are different. Our approach towards life is also different. So subjectivity, what makes me an individual is my own subjectivity. The kind of subject I am. So uh, so it is very much, I mean, true that we are diversified individuals because of various reasons. Okay, so when we impose a unified law, it means we are imposing it on diversified citizens, and we are imposing on citizens who have different sets of beliefs, different sets of religious views, different sets of uh, you know uh, values. Okay, so given this situation, I hope you can understand the dilemma that I am presenting right now. uh, so the challenge is how one can impose a unified law on free citizens. And given the fact that we understand what does it mean to be free, so that's the question we are beginning with. So if there is a need to impose a unified law on diversified citizens, it raises two fundamental challenges. Okay. Uh, it raises two fundamental challenges. I mean, it raises several challenges, but you can categorize into two broad categories. Uh, and I mean, two fundamental uh, challenges. Okay. One is legitimacy, another is stability. Okay. Uh, the challenge of legitimacy and the challenge of uh, stability. Okay. Or bringing stability in social order, or bringing a stable society, or creating a stable society. So let me spend some time uh, with uh, the notion of legitimate use of power. Remember, we are talking about free citizens. Okay. So, given the fact that we are free citizens, the question arises how, or to what extent, the use of political power can be legitimate. So, this is the challenge of legitimacy. I mean, um, how can it be legitimate to coerce all citizens to follow just one law, a unified law? I mean, please remember the point that we are free citizens, and I have already explained what does it mean to be free. So, uh, so given the fact that citizens are divergent, I mean, citizens have divergent worldviews, divergent perspectives. How it can be the case that a unified law can be imposed on a diversified citizens? Okay, as you know, I mean, uh, in various debates, I mean, contestations in political philosophy, one of the important questions, or pressing question in political philosophy across the board, is why would a citizen willingly obey a law? I mean, what is its necessity? I mean, why I am, or why you are willingly, please mark the word, to obey the law. So, you know that no matter what, the 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 body, which has formulated the law, it may be the case that some members of that body, the political body, some members of that body have very different beliefs than the beliefs that I have. So that body has formulated the law. And how uh, can it be the case that I am willingly going to obey the law, of that law which has been formulated by uh, a particular body which has a very different set of beliefs than the beliefs that I have? So this is the um, challenge of legitimacy. I mean, uh, to what extent the use of political power be legitimate, or to what extent political power can be imposed on diversified free citizens. Another is that another issue is stability. I mean, if you know that if many citizens, or almost all citizens, if they will not obey the law, willingly obey the law, that will bring chaos in our society, and that will um, create a very dangerous precedent. Okay, so another challenge, the second challenge that we are discussing is the stability, or I mean, if you do not willingly obey the law, then it seems that you can disobey it anytime you want. I mean, if the law or the perspective from which the law is being formulated is not part of your perspective, or if the reason for bringing out that law is not internalized by you, then you will not simply obey the law. Maybe in some cases you will obey the law. I mean, but it doesn't matter. I mean, but I mean, by not understanding the law completely and its significance, you just obey it. I mean, you don't understand what is its significance and why I should obey it, but you obey it. Okay, so this might bring, instability in the social order. So the second challenge is the stability. So we are facing primarily two challenges. One is the issue of the challenge of legitimacy and the challenge of stability. Why we are facing these challenges? Because we are talking about imposing unified law on diversified citizens. Is it clear so far? Answer some of the students if you can.
Students,
Please answer. Okay,
I
okay.
think
I, I,
they are
got,
understanding
I
it.
got the message. I got the message. Okay. All right. So, uh, I mean, already Dr. Mishra has pointed out rightly that, as we were also discussing it yesterday over phone, that, um, you know, uh, political liberalism prepares the context for Rawls' theory of justice, justice as fairness. Okay, so as you know, another speaker will be speaking on um, justice, Rawls' theory of justice in the next uh, um, week. So I'm not going to reflect on that, but let me tell you that Rawls' notion of political liberalism, or Rawls' view on political liberalism, is uh, 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 very much connected to his view on justice, or what he thinks about this. So, side by side, I will be referring to some issues or some points regarding his notion of justice. Okay, and here in the book, that is Political Liberalism, he calls it political notion of justice, or political conception of justice. And why he calls it the political notion of justice? Because he's saying that it is not metaphysical, nor it is epistemological. It is political. Okay. So I might come to this point a little later. So we are facing two challenges. One is the challenge of legitimacy, another is the challenge of stability. How can we face the challenge of legitimacy? How can we, create the context where a unified law can be imposed on free citizens? I mean, how do we face the challenge of legitimacy? Okay, you know that when we are talking about, political power, And Rawls talks about political power in the context of in a democratic setup. I mean, in the context of democracy. I mean, political power and the relationship between political power and democracy is something significant. So, um, as you know, why I mentioned about democracy, because you know that in a democracy it is believed that uh, political power is the power of people as a collective body. I mean, uh, the body which exercises the power, political power, is actually the representation of the people. uh, so uh, uh, So, in this context, one can ask, what would it mean for citizens legitimately to exercise political power over one another? I mean, if some citizens legitimately, I mean, in what context we can say that people can legitimately use some political power over one another? I mean, legitimate means which is acceptable, which is reasonable, or which is rational. Okay. I mean, we all can accept it. Okay. In spite of our differences. So it is the legitimate exercise of power, or you can call it acceptable use of political power. I mean, here one might ask, um, uh, you are free to ask, in fact, is there something called legitimate use of political power? I mean, whenever it is exercised, it is illegitimate. I mean, one can say that. So, that question also one can ask. Um I mean, uh, can it ever be legitimate? Okay, but we are living in a society where uh, it is probably it is in our best interest. It is in my best interest that I should obey some laws. Otherwise, there will be some very bad consequences that will not suit even my personal interest. So, keeping it aside, the question here is, what is the legitimate use of political power or acceptable use of political power? Here, John Rawls brings in his liberal principle of legitimacy. You can call it liberal principle of legitimacy. What is the liberal principle of legitimacy? I am going to, read a quotation, a small quotation from Political Liberalism, that book. Our exercise of political power is fully proper only when it is exercised in accordance with a constitution, the essentials of which all citizens, as free and equal, may reasonably be expected to endorse in the light of principles and ideals acceptable to their common human reason. I'm going to repeat this quotation again, and of course, I'll explain it. Our exercise of political power is fully proper only when it is exercised in accordance with a constitution, the essentials of which all citizens, as free and equal, may reasonably be expected to endorse in the light of principles and ideals acceptable to their common human reason. I got very interested in the last word, common human reason. In fact, I'm being honest to you. Uh, Um, I mean, I'll be explaining it. So this is Rawls' conception of, Rawls' principle of uh, legitimacy, or it is called the liberal principle of legitimacy. Okay. Now let us discuss what does this principle mean. How should we understand this principle? Okay. Here, one may say that the political power, the question is basically how are we going to use the political power? How can it be legitimately used? Okay. So, one can say minimally that the political power should be exercised in such a way that, it is not the case that it can be exercised only in one way. It can be exercised in various ways. Whatever the way is, all citizens can reasonably be expected to endorse. I mean, we can expect that it should be used legitimately in such a way that all citizens can endorse it. Okay. So here, like, that why it is said that all citizens should endorse it, because if I come to know that you are not obeying a particular, law, the question obviously arises: why should I obey? Many are not obeying. What's the point of obeying? We hear in our day to day life people saying this, that many are not obeying. Why should we obey? Okay, so all citizens should endorse. Here comes, from this point comes the criterion of reciprocity. If I obey uh, a particular law, you will reciprocate it. I expect that you will also do so. You will also obey the uh, that particular law, maybe in a different context. So the point here is, if I am accepting the reasonable enforcement of certain law on myself, I'm accepting that, actually. That reasonably or legitimately, uh, one can I can accept some laws, some basic laws. At the same time, I also believe that you will also do so. You will also obey certain laws, or you will also take the burden of obeying certain laws. So this is the criterion of um, reciprocity. So citizens must reasonably believe that all citizens can reasonably accept the enforcement of a particular set of basic laws. One can reasonably accept uh, the enforcement of uh, a particular set of basic laws. Okay, it may be the case that some people uh, feel coerced. Some people might feel that no, it is not fair. I mean, um, it is a compulsion on part of them that they are obeying this law. In that case, they can freely, these citizens can freely engage with uh, the society's fundamental political arrangements. One can engage with society's political arrangements, fundamental political arrangements. There is a scope to engage with uh, society's political standing. Okay, so here. look at the intensity of this challenge, the challenge of legitimacy. I mean, how intense this challenge of legitimacy is. Again, I come to the question that we asked uh, some time before. How can any particular set of basic laws legitimately be imposed upon a pluralistic citizenry? I mean, how can it be the case that a set of, I mean, particular set of basic laws can be imposed on a pluralistic citizenry or plural citizens? Okay. I mean, one can also ask, what constitution could all citizens reasonably accept or endorse? Can it be the case that there is only one citizen for all sorts of diversified individuals? I mean, there is one constitution for all sorts of diversified individuals. Okay. I mean, why all citizens would obey one constitutions? What it means for citizens to be reasonable? That question also arises. I mean, we keep on saying that, citizens can reasonably accept or citizens can reasonably endorse, okay, um, the exercise of legitimate political power. But the question also arises what it means for citizens to be reasonable. Why we call citizens as reasonable citizens? This is one of the very important notions in Rawls' political liberalism. So it is believed that, uh, I mean, I'll explain what it means to be a reasonable citizen, but it is believed let me tell you at the outset that it is believed that reasonable citizens would accept uh, the set of basic laws. I mean, let us assume at this point that reasonable citizens would uh, accept the set of basic laws. Okay. Now, as I told you, comes the question, what is a reasonable citizen? I mean, what is the criteria for determining who is a reasonable citizen and who is not? At the outset, one can say that reasonable citizens are those who can cooperate with their fellow citizens on terms that are acceptable to all. I mean, uh, if I am a reasonable citizen, I can cooperate with my fellow citizens on the basis of certain terms and conditions which are acceptable to me as well as acceptable to you, because we are making some kind of arrangements between among ourselves so that we can cooperate with each other. I mean, it can be called overlapping consensus, as Rawls John Rawls calls it, overlapping consensus. Okay. So, reasonable citizens are those who abide by mutually acceptable rules. Okay. Um, and uh, they are also given the assurance that others will also do so. I mean, um, I am a reasonable citizen. I can reasonably accept um, different terms and conditions of the society, and at the same time, I believe that others will do so. I mean, others will reciprocate. So sometimes it is um, it may be seen that sometimes citizens may have to sacrifice their own personal interest for the sake of overlapping consensus or for the sake of legitimate use of power. Um, uh, the legitimate use of political power. So, uh, so here, uh, Rawls says, I'm again reading few lines from Political Liberalism. Each reasonable, this is about who is a reasonable citizen. Okay. Each reasonable citizen has her own view about God and life, right and wrong, good and bad. Each has, that is, what Rawls calls her own comprehensive doctrine. Okay. Reasonable citizens are reasonable because of that they are unwilling to impose their own comprehensive doctrines on others, who are also willing to search for mutually agreeable rules. None is willing to force other reasonable citizens to abide or to live according to his beliefs. As I was talking about our own perspectives, our own worldviews, Rawls says that uh, each citizen has her own comprehensive doctrine. I mean, you can generally call it uh, your worldviews or your perspectives. Okay, so all of us have our own understanding of the society and our own understanding of the political context, socio-political context. So Rawls calls it each has her own comprehensive doctrine. Okay, but a reasonable citizen is the citizen who is unwilling to enforce or force that particular doctrine, his particular doctrine, on others. I mean, it is negatively described. A reasonable citizen is the one who is unwilling to force his own doctrine, his own worldview, his own perspective on other citizens. Okay, so that means reasonable citizens are those who are actually in search of mutually, uh, I mean, mutually respectable or reasonable agreements or consensus. Okay, so this is uh, Rawls' view on reasonable citizen. Okay, here comes. I mean, there is another characteristics of. In fact, this is one of the most important characteristics of reasonable citizens. That is the toleration for diversity of worldviews. Okay, this is one of the most important characteristics. Okay, and this with this particular notion, that is toleration, I mean, we use it in our day-to-day life, but we don't know whether many of us understand it or not. What does it mean to be a tolerate, I mean, to be tolerating others? Okay, so uh, reasonable citizens accept. This is again, this point I find very interesting for my own. I mean, I'm saying it from my own interest. Um, Reasonable citizens accept a certain explanation for the diversity of worldviews. I mean, seeking certain explanation or accepting certain explanation, that is very important. That is one of the important marks of a reasonable citizen. Okay, I find another very important point. the characteristics of reasonable citizen, and Rawls calls it reasonable citizens feel the burden of judgment. The burden of judgment. Okay, or I mean, I can call it. I mean, we can generally call it the burden of reason. Okay, I mean, there is, you know, there is a lot of discussion in philosophy on the difference between reason and cause. You know, I mean, uh, if you are a rational person, or I mean, to be very specific, if you are a logical person, if somebody is trying to convince you with arguments, with very strong reasoning, you cannot just remain indifferent, or you cannot just ignore that argument or what that individual is saying. Okay, so like Kant, for example, Immanuel Kant, that reason is something is which comes from within. I mean reason, I mean, we feel the burden of it. I mean, a rational individual, a reasonable person feels the burden of a judgment. Okay, whatever the judgment is, the judgment is, or in whichever context it is being uh, passed. So, um, for example, I mean, if we talk about the questions of religion, the questions of philosophy and morality, I mean, Rawls talks about, you know, these are the deepest questions of religion, philosophy, and morality. And we know that, uh, uh, you know, any answers to these questions, these deepest questions, could be, I mean, there is a possibility that it could be partial answer. I mean, so since these are the deepest questions, we might not have the fuller or the fullest understanding of different questions about religion, different questions about philosophy or morality. So uh, it is expected that a reasonable citizen would understand that people might disagree on their answers to deepest questions. I mean, he has given three broad categories, that is religion, philosophy, and morality. Okay. So we might disagree. I mean, a reasonable citizen will accept that one can disagree and one is free to disagree. And that is the mark of a reasonable citizen. Okay. So here, with this, the notion of reasonable citizen now uh, comes with another notion that is called reasonable pluralism, or or it is called public political culture. Okay, I'll explain what is public political culture. Okay, so we were discussing about human nature, and if human nature uh, is reasonable, what it means is we can disagree on different worldviews. We are free to disagree on various things. We should not impose our worldviews on others. I mean, these are very simple points, but I mean, this means a lot. I mean, I don't think in our working space we understand this point that uh, we are free to disagree. I mean, that is something that becomes something very important issue in our day-to-day life. In many contexts, it is a crime that if we disagree. Okay, so I mean, we more or less we understand these issues. So um, in Rawls' opinion, uh, I mean, that's the difference between uh, Hobbes' view and Rawls' view. In Rawls' opinion, that human beings are not self-centered, human beings are not dogmatic, and human beings are not driven by restless desire of power. I mean, what you may call. So, which may be the case with Hobbes. You might have heard about Hobbes. Uh, so Rawls, according to Rawls, humans are not self-centered. They are not dogmatic. They are not driven by the restless desire of power. Okay, so what we possess is that this human capacity, whatever it may be, this generally called human capacity, is a capacity for genuine toleration and mutual respect. That's how Rawls describes it. That maybe we feel that in the history, that history is full of stories about how we do not tolerate each other. I mean, that may be the case, but gradually, through consensus, we are trying to reach at a point where we are we become reasonable citizens. Okay, and we accept reasonable pluralism. Okay, and about this reasonable pluralism, I mean, that is different from Rawls makes a distinction between mere pluralism and reasonable pluralism. I mean, um it is not sufficient that if we have a diversified worldviews, or if we have in a democratic society, if we have pluralism, that is not sufficient. Pluralism, I mean, as such, might bring chaos, but reasonable pluralism uh, will create a balance. Okay, so that means there could be some form of unreasonable pluralism. Okay, so here is an important distinction he's trying to make between pluralism and reasonable uh, pluralism. Okay, so we see that in our history, we see that there are various religious, moral, and philosophical doctrines which have been developed, uh, and uh, and these doctrines, one might cite these doctrines as, I mean, as the source of toleration. I mean, it is not the case that all religious doctrines are, um, problematic, or uh, or all philosophical doctrines are partial or unreasonable. I mean, one might say that, but uh, there are some context. I mean, there is a perspective from which one can say that these doctrines themselves are the source of toleration, or they themselves endorse some form of toleration. Okay, so it is possible that, I mean, basically it was what he's trying to say, that it is possible to have a reasonable pluralism in religious sphere. Okay, and uh, but the problem is, this does not solve, I mean, so far what we have been discussing, this does not solve the challenge of legitimacy. I mean, uh, uh, look at the question. I mean, please try to recall the question: how one law can legitimately be imposed on diverse citizens? That was the question, that was the challenge of legitimacy. Okay, that issue is not solved. we are trying to approach that particular issue, but that challenge is not resolved as yet. Here one might say that it seems that no comprehensive doctrine can be accepted by all reasonable citizens. I mean, um, uh, comprehensive doctrine means you have your own doctrine, I have my own doctrine, or you have your own understanding of the world. Accordingly, you live your life. I have my own understanding of the world. Accordingly, I live. So, uh, if we try to impose our own comprehensive doctrines on others, it cannot solve the problem of, it cannot face the challenge of legitimacy. It will simply fail. So, therefore, uh, Rawls is arguing, trying to argue that uh, no individual doctrines or comprehensive doctrines can serve as the uh, basis of the legitimate use of political power. It cannot be the basis for the legitimate use of political power. I mean, that means I have a comprehensive doctrine. I have my own comprehensive doctrine. Because of that, this political power must be exercised. That cannot be the basis, and this cannot be the argument also. Okay. So, if this is the situation we face, that our own doctrines cannot resolve the problem of the challenge of legitimacy, what should we do? I mean, if this is the situation we face, then the question is, where else can we find the ideas, the fundamental ideas that will define society's basic laws? What is the source of? If, remember, if my own doctrine cannot help us in, you know, in helping us to legitimately use the political power, or if it cannot help us as the ground of legitimately using the political power, then what else can help us, or from where we should uh, rather collect the ideas which will define the basic laws, a society's basic laws, which all citizens will be able to obey. Okay, that what is the source of these ideas? Rawls calls it public political culture. Public political culture. Okay, here is few lines from about public political culture from Rawls' Political Liberalism. He writes, since justification is addressed to others, it proceeds from what is or can be held in common. And so we begin from, shared fundamental ideas implicit in the public political culture, in the hope of developing from them a political conception that gain free and reasoned agreement in judgment. What he's trying to say here is that when we try to give justification, suppose for a political decision, you are trying to give a justification. Usually, we give justification to others. Okay. And when we give justification, since we give justification to others, it is expected that the justification should be the common ground for all of us. I mean, these justifications should not be my own private privately conceived justifications. Okay, so justification should have a common ground so that I can tell you about this justification, that I am taking such and such decision because of this justification, and this justification should be common. What does that mean? This common justification should be in the public political culture. This justification should be formulated or should be given, collected from public political culture. Now, what is public political culture? Public political culture is the political institutions of a constitutional regime and public traditions of their interpretation. Okay, like you can call it, for example, historic text. This is another example: historic text and documents. These, we know that these are the sources of our common knowledge. I mean, it is not the case that you only have these historic documents or I only have these historic documents. These are the sources of common knowledge. Okay, and uh, likewise, the public political culture is constituted by political institutions of the constitutional regime. Okay, or you can say that it is constituted by public traditions. Okay, it is not the case that this public political culture is something, unique. I mean, it is something which is, um, homogeneous. That is not the case. The public political culture can be uh, diversified in themselves. I mean, in itself. It is not the case that it is. I mean, across the board, public political culture is the same, or the sources of the public political culture is the same. Here comes the political conception of justice. I mean, uh, Rawls talks about the political conception of justice, and why he is bringing in political conception of justice. He says that the pol- political conception of justice can be a solution to the challenge of legitimacy. I mean, the sources we can find from public political culture, but the solution, the political conception of justice, can be a solution to the challenge of legitimacy, which basically means political conception of justice can be thought of, or can be, I mean, one can think of political conception of justice taking sources from public political culture. Okay. So he says political power is to be exercised in accordance with a political conception of justice. And what is political conception of justice? He says a political conception of justice is an interpretation of the fundamental ideas implicit in society's public political culture. I'm repeating, a political conception of justice is an interpretation of the fundamental ideas implicit in society's public political culture. Now, nevertheless, it is an interpretation. And when the issue of interpretation comes, I mean, interpretation of public political culture comes, we know that interpretation can go in different ways. I mean, it is not the case that we can have only one interpretation of public political culture. Okay, so a political conception of justice, one may say that it is not derived from any particular doctrine. Okay, or it is also not derived or originated from existing worldview. That means a political conception of justice, he says, is freestanding. Okay, that's one of the characteristics of political conception of justice. He says that a political conception is freestanding. A political conception of justice, a freestanding. Why is it freestanding? Because it does not arise from any individual doctrines. It arises from public political culture. Okay, and this, since it is freestanding, I mean, we must understand this, that since it is freestanding, political conception of justice is freestanding, uh, we can say that whatever uh, uh, laws that we, or whatever political power we exercise on one another, we can share some of the aspects of political conception of justice. Since it is freestanding, it can be present in all reasonable exercise of political power. So that's why the political conception of justice is not derived from any individual religious, moral, or philosophical doctrines. It is derived from public political culture. Okay. So he argues that, John Rawls argues that the use of coercive political power guided by the principle of political conception of justice will be legitimate. The use of coercive political power guided by the principle of political conception of justice will be legitimate. So there are three most fundamental ideas uh, we find in the public political culture. Okay, what are these three fundamental ideas? One is, I mean, these three fundamental ideas we find in public political culture. One is citizens are free. Second is citizens are equal. Third is society is a fair system of cooperation, or society should be a fair system of cooperation. These three concepts, I mean, these three characteristics or ideas we find in public political culture. Now, one can say that all liberal political conception of justice, please remember that John Rawls is not saying that there can be only one political conception of justice. There can be several, uh, political conception of justice, depending on interpretations of these fundamental ideas. How you interpret these fundamental ideas. That is, citizens are free, citizens are equal, and society should be having a fair system of cooperation. But here, one may say, as I was saying, that one may say that there are various reasonable interpretations. As we are aware, interpretations of free, quote and unquote, the word free, the word equal, the word fair. Okay. But however, how different these interpretations may be, one can say that these are reasonable because these are derived from fundamental ideas, or these are fundamental ideas of public political culture. Okay, so since these are fundamental ideas of public political culture, all liberal, whatever way you interpret, all liberal conception of justice share some basic features of public political culture. Okay, so trying to link, I'm trying to explain the relationship between political conception of justice and public political culture. That is very crucial, I think, for John Rawls. Okay, now a liberal, further, what John Rawls says is that, as I was saying, that all liberal political conception of justice share certain basic features. What are these basic features? All liberal political conception of justice share. Number one, a liberal political conception of justice will ascribe to all citizens familiar individual rights and liberties. Okay. For example, rights of free expression, liberty of conscience, and free choice of occupation. Okay. Second is, a political conception of justice will give special priority to these rights and liberties, especially over demands to further the general good. For example, to promote human flourishing, uh, one can say that a political conception of justice will give special priority to these rights. The third feature is a political conception assures for all citizens sufficient means to make effective use of their freedom. That is one of the basic features. Uh, these are the three basic features all political conception of justice must share. Okay, Himanshu, how much time I have?
There is no time limitation.
Okay,
If you want to complete, you can complete. If
okay.
there is,
It's already 6:20. Can I take another 10 minutes?
yeah, of course, no problem.
Okay, okay, okay. Now these are the issues regarding the challenge of legitimacy, and we discussed how Rawls tried to uh, explain the ways in which, following which, we can face the challenge of legitimacy to use political power. Okay. Another challenge that I have already pointed out, that is stability. Uh, Now, the point to begin with, one can say, is that there is a need to explain why citizens are willing to abide by any rule. I mean, one point is that citizens will obey the rule. Another important point is, and different point is, that citizens are willing to obey the rule. The second point is very important, because if citizens are willing to obey the rule, then it will bring stability, or it will bring a solution to the challenge of stability. So here, one may say that if there will be no reasons or no explanation before citizens to abide by the law from within, this is very important. If there is no explanation from within, if there is no reason coming from within, their own perspective, then social order may disintegrate. I mean, you are obeying it, but you may disobey it anytime. I mean, I'm not really willing to obey it. So, uh, okay. So, here one can say that Rawls advocates the view of overlapping consensus. Okay. He says that overlapping consensus is the reason for social stability. Okay. Like, whatever the reason is, uh, you know, these reasons must be internalized. And here I can make a philosophical point, which is that, you know, I cannot obey a rule which is purely external to me. I mean, the reason for which is purely external to me. I mean, there might be a reason for obeying a rule or obeying a law, but whatever the reason is, it must be internalized in individual context. It can vary from context to context. I will give you one example. So, reasons, in my opinion, cannot be purely external. Reasons for obeying the law cannot be purely external. So, that there are different reasons because of which citizens endorse a law or a set of law. um, it differs from context to context. Okay, each citizen supports uh, a political conception of justice uh, for various reasons. There is no one, I mean, there is no single reason for which all citizens will uh, support a political conception of justice. Regions might be internalized according to their own context. Okay. Here, I will give you an example uh, from uh, the Second Vatican Council of the Catholic Church. Second Vatican Council of the Catholic Church. Here, as I was saying, this is an example of how the reasons, public reason, one can say, is internalized according to our own context. Okay. It declares, the Second Vatican Council of Catholic Church declares that this Vatican Council declares that the human person has a right to religious freedom. This freedom means that all men are to be immune from coercion on the part of individuals or of social groups and of any human power, in such wise that in matters religious no one is forced to act in manner contrary to his own beliefs, nor is anyone to be restrained from acting in accordance with his own belief, whether privately or publicly, whether alone or in association with others, within due limits. The Council further declares that the right to religious freedom has its foundation in the very dignity of human person, as this dignity is known through the uh, revealed word of God and by reason itself. This right of the human person to religious freedom is to be recognized in the constitutional law whereby society is governed, and thus it is to become a civil right. Now, here you can see how one's own reason is merged with the public reason or the fundamental ideas of public political culture. Okay, I mean, uh, unless it is the reason for obeying certain law is uh, becomes part of my own reason, I will not be able to willingly obey it. So one can say that this is a this is where the public culture merges with one's own perspective. The fundamental ideas of uh, public political culture uh, merge with one's own perspective or one's own comprehensive doctrine, depending on the context. Okay, so here one can say that how this liberal module, you can call it liberal module, Rawls calls it liberal module, how this liberal module fits with different worldviews. One may say that this liberalism is derived directly from the deepest beliefs that we are reasonable citizens, and uh, we can we cannot enforce we cannot force others to obey our own rules, which are constituted by our own comprehensive doctrine. So this unwillingness to force one's own law on others is the basis of uh, you know liberalism in one sense. Some citizens might believe that uh, values of a political conception of justice are great values. I mean, we must have these values uh, to live in a egalitarian society. Okay, so here Rawls talks about overlapping consensus. He says that overlapping consensus may be the most desirable form of stability in a free society. What is uh, overlapping consensus? He says that an overlapping consensus is stable for the right reasons. Like each citizen, one can say, affirms a moral doctrine for moral reasons. If I affirms a particular doctrine which is moral in nature, I should have my own reason for affirming that particular reason. And likewise, uh, one must emphasize on public character of reason. Like I tell you, one particular I give you one particular explanation, for example, and there I tell you that these are my reasons. Okay, and you should accept it. Okay, but it may be seen that these are not reasons at all. These are your own, these are coming from your own uh, minds. I mean, these are not in the public sphere. These are not in the popular sorry public political culture. These are not in the public political culture. So one may think that reason is private, which suits one's own choice, but that is not the case. And in that context, Rawls talks about public reason. And uh, it is expected that all citizens uh, may reasonably accept the enforcement of certain laws, certain basic laws, because The grounds of these basic laws are part of our public reason, and the political power must be used in ways that all citizens may reasonably expected to endorse. Here the question arises how citizens explain their political decisions to one another. What is the basis on which citizens will explain their political decisions? Here, Rawls argues that public reason requires citizens to be able to justify their political decisions to one another. Now, the grounds for public reason works as the ground for justification of our political decisions. Not privately conceived reasons can be the ground for exercising political power, okay, or explaining political decisions. And here he says that here he highlights the values and standards which must be in the public sphere. For example, one can say that a personal spiritual revelation cannot be, is not in the public sphere. It is not in the public, and it cannot be the basis of exercising legitimate exercise of political power. And here is Rawls' doctrine of public reason. Let me point out Rawls' doctrine of public reason. And he, again, I'm telling you that he emphasizes on the public character of uh, public reason. That means the reason is not private, reason is public, and it must be available in public political culture. He says citizens engaged in certain political activities have a duty of civility to be able to justify their decisions on fundamental political issues by reference only to public values and public standards. I'm repeating again. Citizens engaged in certain political activities have a duty of civility to be able to justify their decisions on fundamental political issues by reference only to public values and public standards. Here we find there are several important notions like public value, public standard, fundamental political issues, certain political activities, duty of civility. These are various important notions we find, and in fact these are important notions which constitute the essential of public reason. What is public value? Public value are the values of a political conception of justice. For example, freedom of religious practice, political equality of women and of racial minority, or one can talk about the preservation of healthy environment. These are public values. And what are the public standards? One can say that the public standards are the conclusions of science, the established, not the controversial, and public standards must be the ones which appeal to common sense, not to any complex economic or psychological theories. Okay, and public standards, I mean divination, for example, cannot be the basis of public standard. Okay, and you know about the fundamental political issues like who has the right to vote, which religion are to be tolerated, and who will be eligible to own property. These are uh, the fundamental political issues. And what are the certain political activities? For example, exercising power of public office. Okay, uh, I mean, judges are bound. I mean, Rawls argues that the judges are bound by public reason when they issues their rulings. Or, for example, legislators should abide by public reason when they are voting in the legislature. Voters are also, required to be abide by the public reason when they vote. So we know that, in some context, we may not be bound by any duties of public reason. For example, when we are performing on stage, or we are pursuing scientific research, or I mean, there are several examples one can give. Another, the last important notion, which is part of the public reason, is the duty of civility. The duty uh, which all citizens, reasonable citizens, um, uh, or the duty to justify one's political decisions with the public reason, or with the public reason as a ground, is a moral duty. It is not, in fact, it is not a legal duty, it is a moral duty. And therefore, it is said that it is the duty of civility. Okay. For example, some context, if you overstep public reason, it may not be itself a crime, but uh, it is it might morally affect others. So, uh, so one can say that rather citizens have a moral duty of mutual respect and civic friendship, uh, and not to justify their political decisions by appealing to controversial standards of reasoning. Uh, Whatever available, the fundamental ideas which are available in public political culture. I have already pointed out what are the fundamental ideas of public political culture. By these citizens, the reasonable citizens must be guided by these fundamental ideas of public uh, political culture uh, in order to explain their uh, political decisions. Thank you. So what I have done here is I have just tried to explain some basic points about political liberalism, John Rawls' political liberalism. But there are several aspects, and each point or each fundamental point can be discussed extensively, but that is not possible in a single lecture. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Panda. It is, I mean, this political liberalism is all about sound citizen, sound state, and sound relation between the citizen and the state. And political liberalism has its base on equal freedoms and rights, and that are given to every citizen. And John Rawls argues that freedom cannot be, linked to autonomy. That is very crucial. I mean, if you are having freedom, then you should be more responsible while you are exercising your freedom, because the same freedom is also belonging to the other fellow citizens, right? So we generally say that I have every right to swing my hand until and unless it touches your nose. So almost all action of individuals, that is not independent. Somewhere our actions affects to other, and we should be conscious about it. So it is not all about autonomy. There are many learnings, I mean, from your talk. uh, you know this political liberalism given by John Rawls It actually, it teaches a citizen that what they should do and what they should not do, and accordingly, the nature of the state depends on the nature of the citizen as well. Now I want my student Sanjay Meher, Assistant Professor, Political Science Department, Berhampur University, to give his observation on your talk. Yes, Sanjay, you can unmute your audio and video and you can start.
Thank you, Himanshu, for your valuable points.
Thank you, my teacher, my guide, Mishra sir, for giving me this opportunity to give a observation uh, on the talk given by Dr. Manoj Kumar Panda. Uh, Actually, it was indeed a thorough explanation of the concept of political liberalism. But as you said, it needs more time to understand the total concept. You just touched some basic points. uh, Actually, Rawls is such a vibrant thinker. Uh, it needs more time to grasp entire thought
Yeah,
of John
I
Rawls.
just some basic points
Yeah.
since already 6:43.
Yes, yes, yes. Actually, you are explaining very thoroughly so that the student can grasp easily. You are very thorough in understanding. Actually, Dr. Panda has tried to touch some basic points which needs to explain, like value pluralism, political conception of justice, liberal principles of legitimacy, overlapping consensus, the burden of judgment, public political culture, public reasons. But here I want to inform to students that there are two interpretation while studying political thought. One is textual interpretation and another is contextual interpretation. Textual interpretation means you need to read the text uh, and grasp knowledge, and contextual interpretation is you need to focus on context. That's why we may use the term every philosopher is the epitome of his own time. So John Rawls is the American political theorist, liberal political theorist, who have written three important books. First is A Theory of Justice, which is the culmination of various movements of 1960s and 70s of United States. The movements are civil rights movement, liberation of the blacks, equal rights for the minorities, elevation of poverty through the Great Society program, and anti-Vietnam War protest. These raised questions about individual and minority rights, just and unjust wars, and issues of social justice. Here, Rawls tried to provide two principles of justice. The people will choose the principles of justice having in original positions, so that these principles of justice can inculcate into the basic structure or social structure, so that a just society can be established. But it has some defects. It has some problem. First problem is his problem in procedure centering into the notion of original position. As you said, it is actually thought experiment. It is a metaphysical. That's why he revised his thought on political liberalism, which is political conception of justice. Actually, a theory of justice is vehemently condemned by a communitarian thinker like Walzer. He rejected the idea of unencumbered cells. The individual cannot be abstracted from its social position while choosing principles of justice. So when a individual have reason, he cannot have reason without values. So reason and values go hand in hand, because individual born in a particular family grow up in a particular society. As you said, society is diversified, so it is very difficult to inculcate a very true principle of justice into the basic structure of society. That's why he revised his thought on political liberalism. He, instead of two principle of justice, he said it is a political conception of justice, and it is a family of principles, not two principles. Here, the members of this family have three main features in common. He stated first is a certain familiar rights, liberties, opportunities are to be singled out and specified and maintained. Secondly, a certain priority is to be given to these rights over against the claims of the general good and perfectionist value. And third is measures to help citizens make effective use of these three rights by having an adequate base of income and wealth are to be set in place. So political liberalism, actually, it is Rawls. What I can say, Rawls tried to establish his principle of justice through a broader perspectives. Through he tried to touch the diversified society, but he cannot ignore his main thrust of justice. It was indeed a very informative talk, and this is my observation. Thank you.
So thank you, Sanjay. I mean,
Thank you,
uh,
Sanjay. I have uh, taken note of your points. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Sanjay, whatever Sanjay said, it is not against, Dr. Panda.
Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Panda, he unpacked everything, right? So one can, get, I used to say that if you reduce yourself, I mean, as an actor of your own, talk or presentation, then one can better understand, right? You can use yourself in a context, and you can use certain examples of your practical life. I think thereby you can understand philosophy, better, right? So thank you, Sanjay. Now I am coming back to the students. Students, you have any questions? If you have any question, you can directly ask to our speaker. Any questions? Okay, Subhasri, you can ask the question.
Sir, what is the second questions of the Catholic Church, sir?
You have to unmute. Uh,
Sir, what is the second questions of the Catholic Church?
Second question, as in, I mean, in what context you were asking? Second, was there any second question or first question like this?
Sir, she's asking on your examples that you have given in the last,
Okay.
while explaining public reason.
Yeah, I understand the context in which she's asking the question. Actually, as I can see, the quotation from the Second Vatican Council of the Catholic Church, there is no question here. Was there any question? I mean, I really don't understand. Actually, it is a declaration that why citizens have religious freedom. And what I was actually explaining is that here in their declaration, they have tried to cite the public reason by merging it with their own comprehensive doctrine. Are you getting what I'm saying, Subhasri? Like,
Yes, sir.
I am giving you uh, another context. Okay. Like, somebody told you or asked you to obey certain rule. Okay. And it may be the case that the reason he is giving to you, that because of this reason you should obey this rule. Okay. And one might feel that I have individually, I'm talking about yourself, you have no relation. I mean, you cannot connect with that reason. Okay. Or you do not find, how to contextualize that reason in your own life experiences. Okay. So, what can be done here? What one can do here is one will internalize the public reason. One will find out the way to internalize the public reason in one's own context. Okay, whatever, it depends on different interpretations, it depends on different context. Otherwise, what will happen if you yourself do not feel that I have this willingness to obey this rule. If that is not the case, you will not simply obey it, or you might obey it, as I was again and again saying, that you might obey it, but there is no inner willingness on your part to obey the rule. That is problematic. Why there is no inner willingness? Or, I mean, what can be the reason for not having inner willingness? Because the public reason has not been internalized depending on one's own context. Okay. So, what you will do, you will find out a way of, you will find out a way where you can have your own reason. And your own reason for obeying a law and the public reason for obeying a law will not be contrary to each other. They might go together, or they will go together. And here the Second Vatican Council of Catholic Church, what they are saying is, look at their what they say. I'm not reading the full quotation. I'm just two lines, two important points that I'm trying to highlight. See, the council further declares that right to religious freedom has its foundation. Please note it down. The council further declares that the right to religious freedom, has its foundation in the very dignity of human person, as this dignity is known through the revealed word of God. Now, see, this reason, the public reason for having religious freedom have been internalized as their own reason. Okay, that these are the revealed words, the dignity of human person, and this dignity is known through the revealed word of God and by reason itself. Understood? Subhasri? Is she here? Okay.
Is there?
Okay. Okay.
So Durati is also interested to ask something. Durati?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can. So she is from Africa.
Yes,
Sir,
Dorothy.
I'm a bit confused. It seems like John Rawls has taken a perfectionist view of human nature, to say they are not self-centered, in his attempts to create a just society, talking about individuals being free and equal. But then in his theory of justice, he talks about that inequalities should at least make the least advantaged better off, meaning to say individuals in this sense are not equal. So in this contemporary world, how can we apply Law's ideas of political liberalism in order to create a just society, taking into account that individuals are not equal?
Yeah, can you repeat the last point?
I'm saying in this contemporary world, how can we apply Law's ideas of political liberalism in order to create a just society, taking into account that men by nature are not equal?
Okay. What do you mean? If I may know, that men by nature are not equal.
In our natural sense, we are different in our reasoning capabilities, and therefore, even our political participation depends on our capabilities and our abilities. So just to generalize that men are equal by nature, that means those who are not capable, they are being infringed, their rights are being infringed to participate politically.
So see, yeah, now I understood. See, there are different points here we are talking about. One is, as you said, men are not equal by nature. Okay, of course, we have different abilities. Okay, we have uh, different capacities. Some people like to do something; they are better in doing something. Some people are better in doing some other thing. Okay, we are not talking about equality here in this sense. What I think is we are talking about equality in the sense that no matter what, we should get equal opportunities. Getting equal opportunity and by nature being equal, these are two different things, isn't it, Dorothy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so like we are, I mean, we have different capacities. We have our own difficulties. Some people are better off, some people are not. Some citizens have uh, immense people, citizens from a particular world are having, due to the historical developments, they have better capacities maybe, but that is not the sense of equality we are talking. In spite of having different capacities, depending on the context, we should get the equal opportunities.
Let me say something here
Yes.
in this context. I think
Yes.
I have taught Durati. If you Durati, you can remember that when we are talking about equal opportunity, it means non-discrimination principle and positive discrimination principle.
Yes,
And
sir.
with these two
Exactly.
principles, you can defeat the natural inequality. I mean, why we talk about equality? We talk about equality because inequality is natural. That's why, there is a system to equalize. Positive discrimination is there in certain context. Non-discrimination principle should be there. In certain context, positive discrimination principle should be there. Yes, Dr. Panda, I'm sorry. You can
Yeah,
continue.
right, right. Um, uh, Dr. Mishra has rightly pointed out that, see, I mean, we witness these situations in our day to day life. We understand the fact that people are not getting, we are not equal, because not because we have different capacities, but because we are not getting equal opportunities. Okay, if we talk about education, for example, we know that there are many you know places in the world where people are not getting proper opportunity for a better education. Okay, for example. Okay, so getting equal opportunities, and I mean, you can say that there might be some inequality. In what sense? To help the least advantaged citizens in the state. Okay. Like if you need, um, if some citizens need more attention in terms of getting some opportunities. Okay, like for example, in a flood area, if you distribute foods, others cannot say that we are equals, so we should be given foods. That is not the point of concern here. Understood. So inequality can be maintained to some extent so that it can help the least advantaged citizens in the world. Okay. And that is also to bring equality in the society. Understood?
So thank you, Dr. Panda.
Can I
Rawls
add
is
something here?
very, yes,
Can I
Sanjay.
add something?
Yeah,
You,
you can.
actually, Rawls is the first thinker who tries to synthesize both the idea of liberalism and socialism. That's why he is
Yeah.
called liberal socialism or liberal egalitarianism. His first principle is based on uh, equal basic liberties principle. Every individual should get a liberty. But as you said, every person has inequality in reason and capability. Here you may uh, here things can develop that rich becomes richer and poor become poorer. That's why Rawls ordered uh, here use the term lexical priority, priority based rule. First, equal basic liberty principle is given, then equality of opportunity principle is given, and if the society is still unjust, then the difference principle can be applicable. Here, he tried to make the deprived sections to bring them to the mainstream society by using the term greatest benefit to the worst of. And every society, every state has now implemented the difference principle in the form of affirmative action, as you question. In fact, every state has used implemented the difference principle of John Rawls by giving PDS, by giving free health facilities to the deprived sections.
But
If
to
you
what
go to a
extent
public
is
hospital, yeah,
effective that we, yeah.
yeah, if you go to a public hospital for free checkup or free operations, there may be a facility, certain funds that may be given to the people whose income is below 40,000 or 50,000. Rich people cannot avail these kind of facilities, and and it is facilitated through the taxes of the poor people. That is the difference principle, and every country has now implementing the principles, difference principle of John Rawls.
Taxes of rich people or poor people? Rich
Taxes of
people.
rich people, yeah.
You
Sorry,
said
taxes
poor.
of
Okay,
rich
ठीक है.
people
It's a slip of tongue.
should be facilitated
See,
to the poor people.
Rawls is very important because he is actually bringing a honeymoon between the liberty and equality. That is
Yeah.
very important to create fraternity.
Yes.
See, in our preamble, Durati, you can see liberty, equality, and fraternity. If liberty and equality produces fraternity, then this is the win of the social justice. This is the win of the mixed economy. Now, today, what we are facing, the main problem is that there is a infighting between the equality and the liberty. Supporters of equality, they don't understand the liberty, and supporters of liberty, they don't understand the equality. So that in that context, Rawls is very, very important, and he is actually solving the problem through his theory. So I will not take more questions. So we are at the last part. The speaker has been, speaking to us since 2 hours. It's a long talk. I requested Manoj Bhaiya that you can speak for 1 hour, but a speaker is a speaker. I mean, once he starts, there are many things that he is interested to speak, and that's how it moves on. So I request Subhashri Parikh. He's a PG student of Sundargarh Government College, to give a vote of thanks to our speaker.
Thank you, sir. It is my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks to Dr. Manoj Kumar Panda, sir, for delivering an excellent lectures on the topic Understanding Political Liberalism of John Rawls. And thank you, sir. Sir, your idea on political liberalism, John Rawls, have given a great insight on this topic. Sir, as you said that political concept of justice as a notions of the free individuals, and he trying to link with the theory of justice and political liberalism. Sir, your analysis on qualitative and quantitative research was in that. Sir, your thought on empirical and theoretical goes beyond the science and its connections with scientific knowledge as really motivated us. Thanks, sir, for taking out time from your busy schedule to grace this event. Thank you, sir, for inspiring us. A special thanks given to our observer, Mr. Sanjay Mihir, who gives about the two who gives the 2 points, that is actual interpretations and the real interpretations, that inspire all students to get knowledge. I also thanks to Dr. Himanshu Sekhar Mishra sir, Assistant Professors of Sambalpur University,
So thank
for organizing this series of lectures for benefits of the
so
students,
Subhasri,
scholars,
there is a
and
network problem. I think I cannot hear you. Sanjay, can you hear Subhasri clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
Sir,
hear her.
Okay, then Subhasri, you can continue. I cannot hear.
okay. I also thanks to Dr. Himanshu Sekhar Mishra sir, Assistant Professor of Sambalpur University, for organizing this series of lectures for benefit of students, scholars, and academicians. I thank to all the participants of this webinar for this active participations. Thank you, sir.
So thank you, Subhasri. I think I face some network problems. So there is a hotspot. I cannot hear you. Maybe other like Sanjay or Manoj Bhaiya, they can listen. I'm sorry for that introduction, and thank you for your vote of thanks. And this is the end of this event. So on behalf of all, a special thanks to Dr. Panda, my brother Manoj Bhaiya. So भाई ना बहुत धन्यवाद भाई. हाँ मुराकिली भाई ना
Sir,
नमस्कार.
namaskar.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you,
night,
Dr.
sir.
Good night.
You all. I hope you have understood at least some ideas. Thank you.